Magic Bullet Mojo is a really simple tool that you can use in all your favorite programs that with at its default settings takes your normal piece of footage, here's the same piece of footage that we used in that tutorial, and essentially gives it that look by pushing the shadow tones towards a sort of bluish green color, pushing the highlights towards a warm yellow-orange color, and leaving skin tone largely unchanged in between. And I'm going to show you how it works. The most important slider, of course, is the Mojo slider. If you bring it down to 0, there's none of that shadow tinting effect. Now the other sliders will, most of them will still work, but Mojo is kind of the star of the show. With just one slider, you just start slowly bringing it up, and you slowly introduce more and more of that effect that pushes the background darker colors toward that bluish green. And as you can see, we're holding on to skin tones fairly well as we do that. Now, this bluish green color, of course, is something you're probably going to want to adjust to taste, and that's where Mojo Tint comes in. Mojo Tint, when you move to the left, the tint goes a little bit more blue, and as you go to the right, the tint goes a little more green, which starts getting into that Pelham 123 look that has a much more predominant green color in its shadows. All right, so let's sort of normalize that out a little bit. And then you've got Mojo Balance. Now, of course, we're talking about shadows, we're talking about highlights, so you have to decide what's a shadow and what's a highlight. If you start cranking this up, you'll see like Eric's stubble here start get a little green. You can actually reduce Mojo Balance, and it'll consider semi-dark things to still be a highlight, and so you get an overall warmer image that is a little more forgiving for underexposed skin tones. Mojo Balance is actually a really great way to just kind of control the overall warmth of the image. High values, you get a really cold image. Low values, you get a really warm image, but you're still getting that kind of differentiation between shadows and highlights. Now, of course, you want to be able to just dial in an overall warmth value for your image, and so we have the Warm It slider. Now, this is predominantly designed to be used in the positive direction, predominantly designed to warm up your image. And I just want to show you something here. As I move it up, I warm up the image overall. Now I'm going to put Mojo to 0. I'm just going to normalize that tint. I think 50 is the default here. And let's just 0 out Warm It. Okay, so here's a kind of normalized looking image, very similar to what we started with. And as I introduce warmth, this is just a really simple but kind of elegant warming effect. And as you can see, it doesn't just warm up the image, it kind of almost gives it like a sepia tone quality. Now this is why that sort of Mojo idea of bringing blues into the shadows is of value even if you're going for an overall warm image. Watch what happens when I just start to increase Mojo. The background starts going that blue-green, and although I still have an overall image, it no longer looks like a vintage sepia tone look. It has a nice modern look, and Eric is popped off the wall, whereas at 0 Mojo, he's kind of the same color as the wall. So again, it's all about just making your talent really pop out of the shot and giving your shot that kind of present-day trendy look that we see in all these movies. Okay, another value that has that starts off at a default other than 0 is Punch It. So even as we zeroed out Mojo, we're not quite at where we started because, oops, even if we zero out Warm It, because there's a little bit of this Punch It effect. It's just a really soft, gentle contrast, function that is a nice, like soft S-curve. So you can really crank it up high, and you'll never feel like you're really getting too crunchy. Although, of course, you can go way too high with it, and I'll explain something about that in just a little bit. And then the last slider is Bleach It. Bleach It is just a way to gently suck color out of the image, and so at 100, it's going to be getting you almost to black and white, and but Bleach It also goes in a negative direction. So let's just start over with our default values, and then let's give ourselves a negative bleach. You'll see what happens, which is that Eric starts getting a little bit of a suntan and starts matching that look that we associate with Transformers, that poppy, super colorful look. That you can achieve that with negative bleach. Okay, so that's Mojo, and I just want to show you real quick that in After Effects it's exactly the same. So here we'll just apply it to our stairs shot. But one of the things we get to do in After Effects is we get to actually have a little more control over the slider range. So you can see, for instance, Mojo stops at 100. I can't go past 100 by moving the slider, but I can increase it sort of putting the slider into the red by increasing it to 200 by scrubbing up here or typing a new value. This is a really handy feature. For instance, on warm it, you can see I can go warm it all the way up to 100, but those negative values, they're still there for you, but you have to kind of work a little harder to get them. We're using that as a way to show you that there are some values in Mojo that are maybe pushing the sliders a little bit too far. And unfortunately, in Final Cut, I don't have the ability to do that. I can't show you that a slider is too far. So you've got just the whole crazy range of Mojo past 100 and up into the stratosphere all on one slider. So it's really up to you to use a subtle and gentle hand with these. Generally speaking, a little bit of Mojo is great, and a lot is going to make people too conscious of the fact that you're color correcting your footage. The other thing I want to mention while we're here is that we've worked really hard to make Mojo really fast to render. This is a short clip, not very high res, but I'm just going to render it real quick, and you can see that it renders in about 5 seconds, and that is a fully rendered clip for you to work with. So we've really gone out of our way to make sure that Mojo is an effect that is so quick to render that you'll never hesitate to use it. Okay, so we've talked a lot about how we want to preserve skin tones while pushing our shadows into this teal color. But one of the things that, and Eric's skin looks pretty great here, but one of the things that colorists have long known is that there actually is a reference for how to color correct skin, and we talked about that a little bit in the tutorial, that there's actually a line on the vector scope here that is where skin belongs. And as you can see, as I applied Mojo here, Eric actually started off pretty much on the line. That little lump here is his face. And when I turn it on, although he still looks pretty good, you can see that he's moved off the line ever so slightly. And the more I mess around with Mojo and whatever else, the more he's going to drift from that line. And so to give you just a single simple control for the color of the skin tones in your shot, Mojo has a skin color slider. And moving it to the left makes Eric more magenta. Moving it to the right makes him more green. And as you can see, if we nudge it around enough, we can get that little lump in the vector scope right on the line. So that would be sort of a technically accurate skin tone. Now, if you're back here in After Effects, you may be wondering where your vector scope is, and so am I. But since we don't have one, I've just given you a really simple tool for checking your skin tones, and that is this skin overlay here. You just turn it on, and you can see really simply a nice grid superimposed over the image. And that grid is going to, you can do this in Final Cut as well, that grid is going to show up on the image wherever the skin tone is in line with where it should be on the vector scope. Now, I say where it should be, but I do want to mention that ultimately all that really matters is what looks right to your eye. The north point on the compass is not so that you can always only go north. It's so that you know where you're going. And that's the way you should think of this. It's just a guide to help you be consistent. But if you consistently like, as I do, maybe a slightly yellower tone to your skin, then you can do what I would do, which is maybe make Eric's cheeks hit the grid, but let his forehead fall off and be a little more yellow. Now, if you'd like Eric to be to have less variation in his skin tone, I've got a slider for that, which is skin squeeze. Because you can see that no matter where I put this, I can only get parts of his face at a time to be on the grid. And so I'll roll through the skin color here, and you can see like I can either get his forehead or his cheeks, but not both. And that's because people have different colors on their skin, and I didn't put any makeup on Eric before this shoot, but if I had, maybe he would look a little bit more like this. If I increase skin squeeze, what I mean by skin squeeze is that I'm actually taking any colors that are near human skin and I'm mushing them toward human skin. And although it's making the grid go away, it's because my value is not exactly right here. I'm going to adjust it. Now you can see I can get his whole face to have the grid. And if I crank this to 100, I can really make his skin tone super uniform. Now this is another thing you might notice when you're looking at these blockbuster movies, that people have done this trick of kind of unifying the skin tones. Now you can take this too far. I think 100 is probably too much here. Eric's lips are no longer a different color than the rest of his face. In fact, there's really nothing wrong with Eric's complexion as it is, but if you've got a lot of different skin hues in your shot and you want to unify them, or if someone's got a bit of a blotchy complexion, this is a simple slider to help you correct for that, and it works in conjunction with skin color as well. So then lastly, the last color, let's just turn off our overlay here and render that real quick. The last slider I'm going to use on here, like I can actually just take this and copy it into here. Cool. Okay, so the last control in skin is skin solo. Now, in this other shot, so these are the same settings here in these two shots. In this shot, there's not really a whole lot of distracting color or other objects in the frame, but this one, the background's a little more colorful. And one of the things I talked about in the Blockbuster tutorial was simplifying that through the use of a ranged hue and saturation control, taking everything that isn't skin color and reducing the saturation. Well, now we have one simple slider for that. So skin solo, the more you increase it, the more you desaturate everything in the shot except skin. So there it is at 100%, and there it is at 0. So it's just a nice way to kind of de-busy the background. And again, the emphasis here with Mojo is give yourself that trendy current look and really make your talent pop out of the screen. And that's what we're going for here. So maybe not 100%, but almost. Still looks kind of naturalistic, but Eric really pops out of that shot. I like that a lot. Okay, so then the last thing I want to talk about are presets. Because Mojo has enough control to really get any of these kind of looks that we've talked about, it ships with several presets. So for instance, my favorite one maybe is called Mojito, which is just a really subtle version of Mojo. If you look at this is just all the kind of default settings almost chopped in half. And really almost any footage that you like the look of already, you apply this Mojito preset to it and it's just going to get a little bit better. Really handy preset. Here's Mojo 123. This is sort of a taking of Pelham 123 look. Super green shadows, super poppy orange, really contrasty. Mojo Bruce. This is a direct reference back to our Terminator Salvation look. And Mojo Optimus, you can probably imagine what that's meant to look like. And Mojo Resident, this is going to be that warm bleached out look with just a little bit of blue-green in the shadows. Mojo Rising is sort of the opposite of Mojito. It's just a little bit more Mojo. It's just all the default settings kind of cranked up a little bit higher. And Mojo War, which is another kind of general purpose bleach bypass look. And again, I want to emphasize, even with a super desaturated look, it's still worthwhile to try to keep your skin tones in line. So even with a very low saturation image, one where you can barely tell on the vector scope where skin is, it's still actually worthwhile to keep that grid in mind. And the grid is a really helpful tool for that, even where the vector scope can be a little hard to read. And in fact, I like this skin tool so much that I have created a preset for you called Skin Scope Only, where you can actually just, all of the Mojo settings are completely zeroed out, so that you're not doing any Mojo effect at all. You're just giving yourself a handy reference of that skin grid. So if you've got a shot where you're just questioning whether the skin tones are all they could be, pop this preset on it and maybe just start messing around with the skin controls. You don't necessarily have to use Mojo for Mojo if you want the control over your skin tones. So that's Mojo. Real quick, one-click solution to getting the Blockbuster look that helps you preserve your skin tones. Some handy tools to make that whole issue of preserving skin tones a little bit less of a mystery and give you some actual control over it. And some presets that mimic the look of big Hollywood movies. Now, you may ask yourself, when am I going to use this versus when am I going to use Colorista versus when am I going to use Magic Bullet Looks? And all I have to say about that is, I've got all three and I find occasions to use all three. Mojo really only works for kind of normal looking footage. It's not going to rescue footage that already has a strong color tint or odd lighting. People kind of already need to be pretty close to normal looking in your shot in order for it to work. So if you have a really problematic color correction situation, Colorista is always going to be, kind of the power tool. And obviously Looks is really has a lot more control over achieving a wide variety of cinematic looks and has a lot of really fun tricks in it, like the diffusion filters and the gradients and whatnot. Mojo is, the most recent time I used it in a professional capacity, I was just cutting a commercial and I just wanted to kind of have my footage look a little sexier. I wasn't claiming that it was going to be the final color correction, but I just dropped it on and it looked really good, and in fact it strongly influenced the way that we color corrected the final commercial. So Mojo is your quick and easy friend to make your shots look great in the timeline while you're working, and can even take you all the way to final if you like the way it looks. But obviously Colorista and Magic Bullet Looks remain kind of the power tools in your arsenal for getting a real specific look that's unique to you. or for working with footage that maybe isn't quite as cooperative as some of the stuff that I shot specifically for the tutorial.